I go on and did my performance speech. Okay, who here has heard of Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, The Game, or Kendrick Lamar? Okay, well, who knows what they all have in common? Yeah, they're all rappers. That's correct, but the answer I was looking for is that they all come from the city of Compton. Rap is just one small part. It's just one small part of Compton's history. Maybe some of you have heard stories about Compton. It's mainly known for its gang violence. The majority of its population are African Americans and Hispanics, and it continues to be a better city. As a previous member of the community, I think I have a pretty good understanding of its current city structure and history. I say previous member because I moved from Southgate to Compton when I started high school, but even when I moved, I still visited Compton because of my family that still live there. With that being said, I'll be talking about the history of Compton. First, I'll talk about its early history, then I'll talk about how gang violence and rap was a part of the city, and finally I'll talk about my perspective of the city from my time spent living there. The history deals a lot with black and white relations in terms of population. The city itself was founded in 1867 when settlers led by Griffin D. Compton moved there. According to Zach Barron's in his KCET article, Griffin D. Compton donated his land, and that eventually became the city of Compton. The city had other names at first. It was first called Gibsonville. It was later changed to Comptonville and ultimately shortened to just Compton to reduce confusion with another city. During that time, the city was mainly known for its agriculture. A part of Compton, known as Richland Farms, is where many people would have large land and own crops and horses and stuff like that. Some land still exists where people have all that stuff. Some people don't believe me when I tell them that there are still farms in Compton. African Americans began to move to the city in the early 1900s. According to another article by Zach Barron's, people began to move there because of the agriculture. The reason why Compton was majorly a white city was because they had laws where African Americans couldn't move there because of their race. But eventually, those laws became unconstitutional, and that was when more people began to move there. The neighboring city of Watts also greatly influenced the growth of African Americans in the city because Watts was already an established community of African Americans, and after the Watts riots, many people moved out, and that led for more homes to become available. One interesting method that also helped the growth of African Americans in the city is something called blockbusting. According to businessdictionary.com, blockbusting is the illegal practice of selling a home to a minority in a non-minority area, and then the original homeowners would sell their houses for a lower price. So for example, let's say a real estate agent sells a home to an African American in a mainly white neighborhood. The real estate agent will then go to the homeowners and tell them that that minority might bring gangs and violence and drugs to the neighborhood, and that would scare the rest of the homeowners to move away and sell their houses to a lower price than they were originally. So they did that in Compton, and that was how more African Americans moved in while whites moved away. Now that I have talked about some of the early history, I will now talk about its recent history dealing with gang violence and rap. So the city is notoriously known for its gang violence. Rap artists and rap groups also influenced the city. Violence was most prominent during the 1980s. During that time, Compton had a big crack problem, and that also added to the violence. Popular gangs during that time were the Crips and the Bloods. It was normal for gangs to establish themselves in neighborhoods. So, for example, there were the Piru Street Bloods and the Kelly Park Crips. So the Bloods established them around the street of Piru, and the Crips around the neighborhood that was around Kelly Park, which is a park in Compton. But over the recent years, the murder and crime rate has decreased. Rap also influenced violence. Groups such as NWA is known for giving Compton its worldwide fame. Many argue that their music encouraged drug use and violence in the city. In their famous songs such as Straight Outta Compton and F the Police, they publicized what they went through in their music for other people to hear. They rapped about their life in Compton and how they themselves despise the cops there for racial profiling African Americans. Other rap artists that you might have heard of who are from Compton are YG, Tyga, The Game, and Kendrick Lamar. Now that you know some of the history of the city, I will now tell you my own perspective from the time I spent growing up there. As a kid, I didn't really know much about what was going around me. Obviously, as a kid, I wasn't really aware of gangs or any type of racial tensions. The earliest memory I have of anything happening was one time my family was having a party in my backyard, and all of a sudden, some random guy jumped over our wall, and he ran towards us. He said something, I never knew what he said. Then he ran off again to the neighbor's house. And after that, my parents, everyone went inside the house, and then we called the police. And that whole evening, we spent the night inside the house while the cops surrounded the neighborhood looking for the guy. Another interesting story was during the time it was just me and my mom home. Everyone else was out. So at the time, my uncle, he lived in the front house, we lived in the garage, and they had a puppy at the time. And that night it was barking a lot more than usual. So eventually my mom got tired and she went to the house to yell at the dog to stop barking. But she didn't have the key, so she didn't go inside the house. And after she yelled, she heard movement in the house, and she like brushed it off. She thought it was a dog, but eventually when my uncles came home, we realized that they were robbed. So all that movement and all that barking was because someone was in the house. Then going on to my middle school years, gangs didn't really affect me the way I thought it would. I guess the only type of gangs I experienced were groups of students in my school. It wasn't really a gang, it was just like a bunch of group of students being stupid and always fighting. But despite all that, I didn't really go through that much serious, but even though I didn't go through that many things, there were still incidents that reminded me that Compton is not the safest place in the world. For example, there was a time where a dad of one of my friends was killed in a drive-by. So, going on. After middle school, and as I said before, I moved to Southgate, but at the time I still went to Compton to visit my uncles. We still went to church in Compton. I did my confirmation over there because I was already used to the community and the people over there. I liked it a lot more better there than where I live now. And I also decided to become a catechist assistant after my confirmation because, again, I really liked it there. And also at the time, I volunteered with a gardening group that planted vegetables around the city. So that goes back to the agriculture part, and that shows that agriculture is still a big part of the city. So now that I've told about the history of Compton and my view of the city, let's wrap things up. The history of Compton deals with many things, such as agriculture and racial integration. I talked about the history of Compton, how gangs and rap affected the city, and my view of the city. Whether you know Compton for its gang violence or its rap artists, at least now you know the early history of the city and a fresh look on the city. That's it.